Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Katie, I'm the artist at SB Designs, and today we are going to do the pink nutcracker cup that has been super popular the last few years. And normally I've seen everybody do this with the vinyl that you buy. It's 12 by 12 and the seams never match up, and that's always bothered me. So I figured out a way to make it seamless. So I'm going to be showing you how to do that today. I am going to be using this cup for a giveaway, so if you would like a chance to win this and some other goodies, check out my Instagram. I'm going to have all the details posted later tonight, and also join my Facebook group. I'm going to have that and all of my products linked down below with a few discount codes for you guys, so make sure you check those out. Let's get into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is drag my file onto my Pages app on my Mac. It will be different if you have a Windows. I use a Mac. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop that in there. And I'm going to head over to lbcreates.com. She makes all of the best templates, and I am not great at measuring correctly. So I've always used her templates, and they are always spot on with their measurements. So I head over there and I'm going to purchase a template for the same size cup I'm making today. And I'm going to use the measurements from her template and apply it to my design. That way, when I print it out, it's fitted specifically for this cup, and everything should just line up perfectly on its own without me having to do a whole bunch of extra work. And then once you have that sized on your page, go ahead and print it. I always like to make sure that my printer settings are at the highest quality. Make sure you have the correct paper weight chosen. That way you get the best quality print from your printer that you can possibly get. And I've gone back and forth between CRICUT printable vinyl and other products that I've found on Amazon. I haven't really noticed much of a difference in the quality, but for today, I'm using the CRICUT brand printable vinyl. Now that I have that printed, I'm going to go ahead and trim it with my paper trimmer. I wish it was possible to do this with CRICUT Design Space. However, this image was too large for CRICUT to allow me to print and cut it. So I have this really handy little paper cutter here, and I'm going to get it as exact as I can and slice it. The tops and the bottoms, if they're a little bit longer than they need to be, that's not a big deal. We're going to trim that anyways. But on those sides, I am definitely going to be a perfectionist and make sure they are right where the cut line is. So now I'm ready to wrap my cup. I have gone ahead and prepped and painted my 24-ounce plump from the Steel Magnolia. And I'm going to take my angle ruler and place it on the bottom. And I'm using an an alcohol ink marker in a light pink that matches my vinyl, just in case. And I'm going to mark a straight line from top to bottom. That way I know where I need to place my first edge for this. Now that we have our guide marked, I'm going to go ahead and take my vinyl, and I folded down about an inch of the backing from my vinyl. I normally cut this. I could not find my scissors anywhere when I was recording this. So I just went ahead and folded that down. And I'm going to line it up right on that line and make sure that the top edge is also squared off. So once I have my vinyl anchored down, I'm going to pick up my cup and just start peeling away that backing just a little bit at a time, while at the same time I'm on the other side kind of pressing it out from the middle going out. Now, if you need to pick any of this vinyl back up and replace it to get any air bubbles out, do so very gently since you already have the paint on there. But you're just going to continue this all the way around the cup. Normally when I'm doing a template like this, I do have another video linked If you're actually using a stencil, you can use transfer tape, which makes lining this up so much easier because you don't want to use transfer tape over printable vinyl. In my experience, all it will do is pull up that ink and you will end up reprinting this. Once you get to the very end, I am not going to press down that edge quite so hard yet because I want to make sure that it is lined up. So I'm going to leave that lifted a little bit and I'm going to grab my tiny little pair of scissors. That way I can get in and trim off any excess that might still be there that doesn't line up perfectly. And just a little random side note, I guess, for all my ladies watching. I know my nails were terrible. I watched this and I was like, oh my goodness. And I couldn't really refilm it. So, yeah, I just painted cups, didn't realize that my hands were nasty. And yeah, so we're going to get back to the tumbler now. So, off the nail subject. Okay, so we are trimming off that edge there and making sure it lines up perfectly. Once we have everything trimmed and we are happy with how our two seams come together, go ahead and press the seam flat, and then we're going to trim off the top and the bottom. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my knife and slice off any excess just from the bottom of that tumbler. I want the bottom of my cup to be able to sit flush on my table while I am slicing off that little bottom ring. So I definitely want to get that excess off so it's not getting in the way of my cup laying flat. Now, if you guys don't have one of these neat little vinyl cutters already, you need to get one. I have had this for several years now, and I don't even remember where I got it. But I am going to see if I can find one somewhere that's, the same concept, I guess, and link it for you guys because it's an actual lifesaver. You can adjust the height on these so the slice can be as thin or as thick as you want it to be. For this one, I really didn't want a whole lot of space, but I did definitely want to have a nice crisp edge on that. So I just went around the bottom and I went back around the top just to expose some of that stainless steel. Now, when I peeled that up, some of my white paint did come off the bottom there. But it's not really going to matter. We are going to go in with white paint later. I ended up doing this the first time in purple and hated the color. So when we put epoxy on it, you're going to see some purple on it. Don't mind that. Ignore that completely. Don't put purple on your tumbler. Just once you get these off, we're going to go right into the epoxy and ignore anything else that you see that I might have done. I'm going to go ahead and go in with my first layer of epoxy. And as always, I am adding in luster dust, pure from Diamonds and Dust. That will be linked down below. And again, as always, I am using KS Resin's Liquidy Split on this. That way I can keep going on it in just a few hours and I don't have to wait until the next day. I used about 20 milliliters of epoxy on this step. And once I had it covered, I went in with my torch to pop any bubbles. I am always very careful when I am popping bubbles over vinyl, though, especially printable vinyl. I haven't had issues with regular vinyl that I've bought from someplace, but whenever I print it myself, I'm always very, very careful when I go in with my torch because I have had my torch actually light the vinyl on fire before. So just be very careful when you go in with your torch to pop those bubbles because you don't want to be like me and almost burn your entire house down. Once our epoxy is all cured, you can see that I went in with the purple. I didn't love it. It didn't give enough contrast for me. So I decided to do white over top of it. So I went in with my white acrylic paint. I just bought the cheap stuff from Walmart. Any white acrylic will work for this. And I went in with my fan brush starting out. I ended up switching over to my dry brush because I liked the way that looked better. Now, this is not any kind of a new technique. I just watched a video where Jessica Flynn does something very similar to this with glitter. Now, we're not going to be using glitter on this, but I think she used Mod Podge instead of paint and Tack-IT. But I'm going to link her video down below because it looked wonderful and I loved it. So I wanted to do something kind of different on this. I don't just love straight vinyl wraps. I always want to do something a little bit extra on them, so I thought that this was perfect. So I'm just going to keep dry brushing here, getting it down however far you want it. I didn't go maybe a quarter of the way down with this. I wanted to make sure that I got all that purple covered up because I really didn't care for that. And once we are done doing both the top, and I went down and did just a little bit on the bottom. So once we're done doing the top and the bottom, I'm going to let this dry. So once that was dry, I went ahead and went in with my Tack-IT. And I have seen different people do Tack-IT different ways. I like to use the 50-50 mixture, so it's 50% water and 50% Tack-IT over and over, and I mix that up. And I'm just going to brush it on here over top of my white. It doesn't really matter to me if some of it isn't exactly in the white or not. I wiped some of it off here because it was down way too far, but this doesn't need to be perfect or directly just on top of where my paint was. I just laid it down. And with Tack-IT, you're going to let it dry for about 20 minutes until it's just tacky before we move on to the next step. So we've gotten that nice and tacky, and I'm going to grab my luster dust again. And it's again the pure that I put in the epoxy on the first layer. And I wasn't sure when I did this if it was going to be easier to like dip my finger in or pour it on there. So I just kind of poured it on there a little bit and started rubbing it in to do the Tack-IT method. Normally I would just cover it in glitter, but since this isn't glitter and it's more of almost a mica powder, I did a little bit differently. And it worked really well and gave me exactly the look that I was hoping for. So I just sprinkled it on, rubbed it around, and then I went ahead and got the bottom of it as well. And once this was completely covered and I had the look I was going for, I took this outside and used like a really old fluffy makeup brush, like a big poofy powder brush, and got all of the excess out of the middle area where I didn't want all of this extra luster dust in, and I spray sealed it. I have not had the best luck putting epoxy over Tack-IT without first sealing it. So I do always seal that with spray sealer before I go into my next coat of epoxy. Once our spray sealer is dry, I'm going to go in with about 20 milliliters of KS Resins Liquidity Split again and just coat over that so we have a nice smooth surface to put our water slide decals on. Now, I know that I just said water slide, and here I am with vinyl, but I really wanted my wording for this to have an offset. But I didn't want to have to print printable vinyl and then the rest in water slide. So I created an offset for this decal in vinyl and just placed my water slide right on top of it. I purchased the CLIPART pack that matches this digital paper that I had bought from Etsy. And I just took some of the snowflakes that she has on there and the ornaments and some of the little doodles. just so that I could have a little bit extra up in that white and add a little bit more to the design on here. I had really no plan on where I wanted to put these. I just kind of eyeballed it and put them wherever I thought that they best incorporated into the design. So once I had all of those on there, I went ahead and let those dry and went in with another coat of epoxy. So we're gonna go in and coat it one more time before we do our rims. I do not like doing my rims when I have either exposed vinyl or water slide. So I always do a layer of epoxy on top of my decals before I do my rims. Sometimes I will do my rims before I even do the decals. It just kind of depends on the mood I'm in, I guess. Now, once that's done, I can go ahead and sand down that top rim and any other spots that might need a little bit of sanding. It was really cold outside on the day that I did these, so I opted to do them inside. Whenever I do these inside, I have two sanding blocks. I have a coarse sanding block and I have a fine sanding block. So I'll go in with my coarse one first. And I always use my sink and get everything wet first because you do not want any of that epoxy dust getting in the air on your clothes. It's always safer to wet sand all of this. And once I'm done with that, I'm just going to go ahead, since we're already at the sink, and wash it with some dish soap and dry it with some paper towels before I go into my final coat of epoxy. And once that is cured, we are finished. I loved how this one turned out. I hope you guys had fun. I am actually going to be doing a giveaway with this cup, so head over to my Instagram if you want to enter, and make sure you give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks, guys. See you next time.